My name is Nicole Freeling, and I'm with the Montana Office of Public Instruction as part of the statewide longitudinal data system team. And today we have an opportunity to share a little bit about a research project that partners with the efforts with Dr. Tricia Seifert from Montana State University, really all to better understand the student experience at Montana tribal colleges in and around the time frame of the COVID pandemic. Now, we're in the very early stages of this project, but certainly excited to share a little bit with you today. Tricia, would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Good afternoon or morning, depending on your time zone. My name is Tricia Seifert, and I'm really honored to be a part of this research team and this project with our tribal college partners across the state of Montana.
Our SLDS research project really began with a purpose of establishing some data linkages through smaller research projects with our 7 state tribal colleges. And each of those we currently don't have data linkages with as part of our Montana University system. And then now with such a focus on the pandemic through some of our supplemental funding, which has really allowed us to explicitly focus on COVID's impact, our research has expanded to collaborate with the tribal colleges to better understand how the pandemic has really impacted their students, for example, like their enrollment data. So given 3 particular areas, so one being the K-12 American Indian achievement gap that's recognized in Montana, another being tribal college density of American Indian students and their student population, and then third, just the disproportionate of impact that COVID had on our American Indian population in Montana. So with those 3 areas in mind, it's really important for us to understand how COVID is going to and has impacted this particular population of students who is already not at the same level of other students in our state, and just in terms of the metrics that we use for achievement. So to begin, I want to provide some context for this project in and about those 3 areas, and then Dr. Seifert will provide some details about the progress of this study so far. Next slide, please. So American Indian K-12 students in Montana make up about 11% of our total student population, and historically and with persistence, they drop out at higher rates and achieve at lower rates compared to their non-native peers. This has really become acknowledged as an achievement gap for American Indian students in Montana, perhaps not unlike other achievement gaps that are recognized in other states for other subgroups of students. So for example, you can see the graph that I've copied here on this slide showing graduation trends. So American Indian students, which are the blue bars, they graduate at lower rates. And if you look at that most recent school year, they're at just about 70%, where in comparison, their non-native peers are graduating at over 88%. And here I might just take a moment to kind of plug, we are just about ready to post a new dashboard on our SLDS website, which is GEMS, that focuses explicitly on American Indian student achievement. And then in addition to that, on a biennial basis, we have the American Indian Student Achievement Data Report that gets prepared as part of the prep for our legislative sessions. Now, those reports and the dashboard that we will have in GEMS, they both serve very valuable roles in terms of highlighting that a gap does exist for our K-12 American Indian students, but as we know, these performance indicators alone certainly do not provide the whole data story for why the gap persists. So in response to this, we recently partnered with our American Indian Student Achievement Team, or just ASA, as we refer to them, internal at the OPI, to begin a body of some qualitative work that explores the factors, perhaps influencing the achievement gap, collecting narratives from some of our stakeholders. And this project really reflects the complexity of the gap itself and is in conversation with the tribal college research that we're discussing today, as it builds on the K-12 student experience into that of the post-secondary. Now these data sources I'm plugging here, these are active links in this slide, and then I also provide them as resources at the end of the deck as well for anyone who's curious about learning a little bit more about that context in Montana. Next slide, please. All right, the second area. So Montana tribal colleges serve approximately 2,500 students in Montana each year, and 87% of that student population identifies as American Indian. So the enrollment, the persistence of this population is of incredibly high interest to us, where not only have these students graduated K-12, but they've continued on to a post-secondary experience as well. Montana itself is home to the highest concentration of tribal colleges in the nation. We have one tribal college located on each of our 7 reservations in the state, and you can see those highlighted in the orange color on the map here on this slide. And the Montana OPI has data linkages with all of our schools within the Montana University system, except for those 7 tribal colleges, which really comes down to a bit of an equity issue. So in this way, this project will serve a very important purpose in building some of that trust and the relationships with these institutions around data sharing to begin addressing this. Next slide, please. The last area that helps identify some need for this particular project is the impact of COVID itself on our American Indian population in Montana, which disproportionately impacted this population. Our American Indian peoples make about 7% of our total state population, but they were over 30% of our COVID-related deaths. The pictures that you see on this slide, as well as the cover slide from kind of our title page, is a response to this pretty drastic reality. So in Billings, which is one of our Montana cities, I'm not really sure if I can say it's a city. I'm not sure if Montana truly has cities, but one of our larger towns, perhaps. So we have the rim rocks that kind of frame the edge of that town, and there were 7 teepees erected and lit up to honor the victims, those victims of COVID-19. Now, all in all, we are certainly interested in understanding how COVID impacted all of Montana's students, but especially our American Indian student population, who already historically have disproportionate access to academic achievement and completion, and were disproportionately impacted by COVID in our state. So for example, tribal communities, they lost a disproportionate number of members, in particular their elders, due to COVID. And so the losses in terms of language and culture that would have been housed by those elders, coupled with really an inability to gather and grieve in ways that would have been consistent with their culture, with cultural protocols, that could have impacted students across their education in terms of motivation and achievement, enrollment, and persistence. So in this way, we really have an even greater need to understand COVID's impact on Montana American Indian students, in particular experience around K-12 graduation, post-secondary enrollment, and then persistence. And this project allows us insight to a very significant portion of this student population who participate in tribal college as their post-secondary opportunity as Montana American Indian K-12 graduates. Next slide, please. So this project, I kind of alluded to this, but it's funded through our 2019 SLDS grant work, as well as some supplemental funds that we've received more recently that allow us a great capacity for focus on the impact of the pandemic itself. And at the end, our goal is 2 target outputs. So the first is a state level report, and this would be used, more of a policy focus for legislature, for the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education, these sorts of things. It'd be aggregate data and used to really inform the American Indian student experience K-12 in college and career readiness, and then post-secondary transition and experience, all in the wake of the pandemic timeframe. The second target output is more tribal college specific outcomes and reports. This would be more disaggregate in nature and for the unique tribal colleges themselves, owned by the tribal colleges themselves, to be able to be utilized as actionable and relevant data for the work that they're doing. And of course, this study is being made possible by the incredible partnerships that we have with folks both internal to the agency, such as our ASA team, and external to the agency as well, like MOTSOC or the Montana Post-Secondary Education Opportunities Council. That is an acronym I think that requires a bit of practice. But at the heart of this work and of this project, it's led by Dr. Seifert, who I'd like to hand over to now. She has spearheaded the methods for our collaborative research design with our participating tribal colleges. So, Dr. Seifert.
So I think it's really important to take a look at the enrollment in Montana's tribal colleges over a period of time, because I feel like in recent years, we've talked about changes really from 2019 to 2020. And I think if we look at a broader span of time, we have a bigger understanding of sort of the ebbs and flows. And you can see here that in 2015, our overall enrollment in Montana's tribal colleges was just over 2,400. And in 2020, that certainly dipped, but only after it peaked in 2017. And when we compare this overall decrease in Montana's tribal college enrollment at a little over 6%, I want to put that in context to what we are seeing nationally and in the Montana University System's two-year college system. So when we compare the tribal college enrollment to the Montana University System's two-year colleges, that enrollment decrease in that 5-year span is actually 30%, which is even more concerning than the national trend that Jim alluded to when we look at the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center data that from 2015 to 2020 shows a dip of enrollment at 22%. And so I really want to suggest that this may be a remarkable good news story. There may be something that we need to definitely understand about tribal colleges in the fact that their decrease is substantially lower than that in enrollment over time from our other two-year college sectors. And so I want to place this conversation as a research study that's building and seeking to understand the strengths of our tribal colleges, and not one that is based in a deficit model. I also want to note that what we're seeing in some of this change over time from 2015 to 2020 is and I should apologize, this should actually say a positive 5% in growth in our female student population and a decline in our male student population. And again, this gives us light into what do we need to uncover? Because these are enrollment patterns and trends that are consistent nationwide. And so what are we learning about enrollment intensity, enrollment by different genders, and enrollment by our different groups? So if you would advance to the next slide, please. When we reached out to Montana's tribal colleges, I began by saying, we know what some of the numbers are. The numbers are available. That slide was based on figures provided by the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. We can compare those to dashboards put together by the Montana University System. We can compare those to benchmarks and dashboards from the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. The numbers in many ways are known. It's the narratives, the stories of what is contributing to student enrollment, their retention, their persistence in light of really difficult situations. Nicole alluded to the fact that our tribal communities lost elders and lost members of their community at proportions substantially larger than the rest of Montana. And in light of that, their enrollment increased from 2019 to 2020 overall. And so we really see this, the progress of this research study is using and drawing from indigenous methodologies of research grounded in what Kirkness and Barnhart refer to as respect. We have to respect the tribal colleges and their communities, the knowledge base, the wisdom that is within, to create a research study that is relevant to their interests, their questions, that it's developed in a way that really honors reciprocity and the learning together, and that we are responsible for maintaining that relationship. And so as I have engaged and worked with different tribal college partners, I am always coming back to how are my actions grounded in respect and relevance, reciprocity and responsibility. And so when we met just recently, the question was, what are the questions that would be of greatest interest to your community as it pertains to recruitment and retention of your students? What will provide actionable data so that your work is better support students, the staff and the faculty who are so committed to their success? And so in so doing, we're not asking for them to unearth a bunch of new numbers, but really to help us ask the questions that arises the narratives and the stories to understand the why and the how it is that students are able to persist in light of some very difficult challenges. And in so doing, this is really a community-based and participatory research process. We're just getting started. At this point of the 7 tribal colleges, 4 are on board. We're excited to partner with them. They literally cover all of Montana. And so I always, for people who are not familiar with the size of our state, when I drive the hypotenuse, it's 12 hours from the northeast corner to the southwest corner. And so doing this work is like driving from Chicago to Washington, D.C., just to put it in some sort of perspective. So it's a lot of windshield time. It's a lot of Zoom time. It's a lot of spending time understanding and asking questions in community with one another. To work with our communities at Fort Peck Community College up in the northeastern corner, and Little Bighorn College down in the southeastern corner, and Blackfeet Community College, who saw an increase in their enrollment, who made Blackfeet language a must-see TV event so that people across their community could learn the language. On the border of Glacier National Park. It's working with these partners to learn together. And that's what we look forward to doing in understanding the recruit and retention, not just the challenges, but really the opportunities that they have seized to make this story where we are today.